Hello guys, today I'm going to be showing you how to divide with decimals using the trick or treat method. And you're going to see how really the only thing that's going to be different is where we're going to put our decimal or answer after we've divided, just like we did last week. So we're going to get right into this problem. Our first problem is going to be 1 and 12 hundredths divided by 2. So the first thing we're going to do is we're still going to set up our dividend into its own division houses. So I'm still going to have my 1 here. I'm going to write the decimal. I'm going to write my other one in a division house, and I'm going to write my 2 in its own division house. So I'm just writing the decimal in between my division houses, and that's going to show us where to put in our answer when we get to the end. And we're dividing by 2, so I'm going to write 2 on the outside here. And our first step is still going to be, after we set up our problem, that we're going to see how many times 2 can go into 1. Now 2 times 1 is already 2, which is too big, so we have to go 2 times 0. 2 times 0 is 0. After we multiply, we have to subtract. 1 minus 0 is 1. And you're going to bring that number to the next division house. So instead of 1, it's going to be an 11. And we need to see what number times 2 will get us closest to 11 without going over. 2 times 2 is 4, 2 times 3 is 6, 2 times 4 is 8, 2 times 5 is 10, and 2 times 6 is 12, which is too big. So we have to go 2 times 5. 2 times 5 was 10. After we multiply, we have to subtract. 11 minus 10 is 1. And we're going to bring that 1 to our next division house, which would make that a 12. And 2 times 5 was 10. 2 times 6 is exactly 12. So we're going to go with 6. 2 times 6 was 12. After we multiply, we have to subtract. 12 minus 12 is 0. So no remainder on this one. And we're done. All we have to do, this last step, the only part that's different is we're bringing our decimal straight up in our answer. So instead of it being 56, it's going to be 0 and 56 hundredths as our answer. And you still check your answer by multiplying the same way we did last week. So I'm going to check my answer by doing 56 hundredths times 2. 2 times 6 is 12. 2 times 5 is 10, plus 1 is 11. 2 times 0 is 0, plus 1 is 1. And there are 2 numbers after a decimal, so I move my decimal 2 spaces. I still get 1 and 12 hundredths as my answer, which is what I started with in my dividend, so I know my answer is correct. And the only thing that was different is moving our decimal straight up in our answer. And we're going to go ahead and go on to the next problem, which is going to be 14 and 91 hundredths divided by 3. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to separate 14 and 91 hundredths into its own division house, since that is our dividend. So I need a 1, I need a 4. My decimal's here, so I'm going to put my decimal. My 9 needs its own house, and so does the 1. So I got all my digits there, and we're dividing by 3. That's our divisor, so I'm going to put it to the side. And we need to know what number times 3 will get us closest to 1 without going over. 3 times 1 is already 3. That's too big, so we have to go 0. 3 times 0 is 0. After we multiply, we have to subtract. 1 minus 0 is 1. 1 is less than 3. So we're good to move our 1 over to the next division house. And we need to know what number times 3 will get us closest to 14 without going over. 3 times 4 is 12. 3 times 5 is 15, which would be too big. So we have to go 3 times 4, which gives us 12. After we multiply, we have to subtract. 14 minus 12 is 2. 2 is less than 3, so we're good to bring our number over to the next house. So that makes that a 29. And we need to know what number times 3 gets us closest to 29 without going over. 3 times 4 was 12. 3 times 5 is 15. 3 times 6 is 18. 3 times 7 is 21. 3 times 8 is 24. 3 times 9 is 27, and 3 times 10 is 30, which is too big. So we have to stick with 3 times 9, which gave us 27. After we multiply, we have to subtract. 29 minus 27 is 2. 2 is less than 3, so we're good to bring our number over to the next division house, which gives us 21. We need to know what number times 3 gets us closest to 21 without going over. 3 times 9 was 27, that's too big. 3 times 8 is 24, that's still too big. So 3 times 7 does actually give you exactly 21. So we're going to go with 7. 3 times 7 is 21. After we multiply, we have to subtract. 21 minus 21 is 0. So no remainder. And our last step is bringing our decimal straight up into our answer. So I'll move my decimal straight up. So that gives me 4 and 97 hundredths as my answer. And I'm going to check that with multiplication. 4 and 97 hundredths times our divisor, which is 3. 3 times 7 is 21. 3 times 9 is 27, plus 2 is 29. 3 times 4 is 12, plus 2 is 14. And there are two numbers after a decimal, so move my decimal 2 spaces. Gives me 14 and 91 hundredths, which is my dividend, what I started with. So that shows me that my answer is correct. And we're going to go ahead and move on to the next question, which is going to be 51 and 36 hundredths divided by 12. So the first thing I'm doing is still separating my dividend, 51 and 36 hundredths, into its own division house. So 5 needs its own house, 1 needs its own house. Then we have our decimal, so I'm going to put my decimal there. 3 needs its own house, and 6 needs its own house. And we're dividing by a divisor of 12. So I'm going to put my 12 out on the side. And I need to know what number times 12 will get me closest to 5 without going over. 12 times 1 is already 12, which is bigger than 5, so we have to go with 0. 12 times 0 is 0. After we multiply, we have to subtract. 5 minus 0 is 5. 5 is less than 12, so we're good to bring it over to the next division house. Makes that a 51. And we need to know what number times 12 will get us closest to 51 without going over. 12 times 3 is 36. 12 times 4 is 48. 12 times 5 is 60, which is too big. So we're going to have to go with 12 times 4, which is 48. After we multiply, we have to subtract. 51 minus 48. You can't do 1 minus 8, so you got to borrow. This becomes a 4, and this becomes an 11. 11 minus 8 is 3, and 4 minus 4 is 0. 3 is less than 12, so we're good to bring it to the next division house. Makes that a 33. And we need to know what number times 12 will get us closest to 33 without going over. 12 times 3 is 36. That's too big. So we're going to have to go down 1. 12 times 2 gives us 24, which is close without going over. So we're going 2. 12 times 2 was 24. After we multiply, we have to subtract. You can't do 3 minus 4, so you have to borrow from this 3, which makes that a 2. And this 3 becomes 13. 13 minus 4 is 9. 9 is less than 12, so we're good to move our 9 over to the next division house, which makes it a 96. And we need to know what number times 12 gets us close to 96 without going over 96. And we've already done 12 times 4 is 48, 12 times 5 is 60, 12 times 6 is 72, 12 times 7 is 84, and 12 times 8 is actually exactly 96. So we're going to go times 8. 12 times 8 is 96. After we multiply, we have to subtract. 96 minus 96 would give us 0, no remainder. And now that we're done dividing, we just need to bring our decimal straight up on our answer. So instead of 428, our answer is 4 and 28 hundredths. And we're going to check that with multiplication. 4 and 28/100 times our divisor, which is 12. 2 times 8 is 16. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. 2 times 4 is 8. We're on my second row, so I gotta add a 0. 8 times 1 is 8. 2 times 1 is 2. 1 times 4 is 4. If I add those two rows together, I'm gonna give myself some more room, so I'm gonna add up here. 6 plus 0 is 6. 8 plus 5 is 13. 9 plus 2 is 11. 1 plus 4 is 5. And there are two numbers after a decimal, so I'll move my decimal 2 spaces. Gives me 51 and 36/100, just like my divisor that I started with. So that shows me my answer is correct. Or excuse me, just like my dividend that I started with. So that shows me my answer is correct. If it matches your dividend, what you started with, that tells me my answer is correct. And that is why the decimal in these questions is so important. Because if you don't have a decimal, move straight up in your answer, you're going to get a way bigger number than 51 and 36/100. And we're going to move on to our last question, which is going to be 79 and 35/100 divided by 23. So we're still going to separate our dividend into its own division houses. So we need a 7, a 9, then we have our decimal, need a 3, and we need a 5. And our divisor is 23, so I'm going to put that at the side. And we're starting off by seeing what number times 23 will get us closest to 7 without going over. 21 times 3 is already 23. That's too big, so we have to go 0. 23 times 0 is 0. After we multiply, we have to subtract. 7 minus 0 is 7. And 7 is less than 23, so we're good to bring it to our next division house. To make that a 79, we need to know what number times 23 will get us closest to 79 without going over. I don't know off the top of my head what that number would be, so I'm going to try 23 times 3. 3 times 3 is 9, and 3 times 2 is 6, 69, pretty close. I'm going to see if times 4 gives us closer. 3 times 4 is 12. 4 times 2 is 8, plus 1 is 9. That's too big, so we're going to have to stick with 3 is the closest. 23 times 3 gave me 69. After we multiply, we have to subtract. 9 minus 9 is 0. 7 minus 6 is 1. And 10 is less than 23, so we're good to bring that over to our next division house, which makes this a 103. And we need to know what number times 23 will get us closest to 103 without going over. And we already know 23 times 4 is 92, so I'm going to try times 5 to see if that gets us closer. 23 times 5. 5 times 3 is 15. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 1 is 11. 115 is bigger than 103, so we can't do times 5, too big. So we have to go times 4. 23 times 4 was 92. After we multiply, we have to subtract. 3 minus 2 is 1. We can't do 0 minus 9, so we have to borrow. This becomes a 0. This becomes a 10. 10 minus 9 is 1. 11 is smaller than 23, so we're good to bring that over to our next division house. Makes us a 115. And if we check our work, we need to see what number times 23 will get us closest to 115 without going over. But if you look over here, this is why you don't want to erase your work, guys, when you're working out these questions. We already did 23 times 5 gives us exactly 115, so we can't get any closer than that. 23 times 5 was 115. After you multiply, you have to subtract. 115 minus 115 is 0. And there are no more numbers, no more division houses, so all we have to do is bring our decimal straight up on our answer. That gives us 3 and 45/100. And I'm going to check that with multiplication. 3 and 45/100 times 23. 3 times 5 is 15. 4 times 3 is 12, plus 1 is 13. 3 times 3 is 9, plus 1 is 10. I'm on my second row, so I have to add a 0. 5 times 2 is 10. 4 times 2 is 8, plus 1 is 9. 2 times 3 is 6. If I add my two rows together, 5 plus 0 is 5. 3 plus 0 is 3. 9 plus 0 is 9. And 1 plus 6 is 7. Two numbers after a decimal, so I'll move my decimal 2 spaces. That gives me 79. If I had this number, just so you can see a little bit better, 2 spaces, 79 and 35 hundredths, which is my dividend that I started with. So that's how I know my answer is correct. And that is all it takes to divide with decimals. So here are a few questions for you to practice on your own.